eating problems in kids with autism is very common. A lot of times these children become very rigid with what they will and will not eat. On this blog, we're explaining how to introduce new foods to not only children, but young adults as well.
Yeah, being a picky eater kind of like comes with the territory sometimes. We work with a lot of kids who only eat white foods or only eat food that came from a certain store or only fast food or things like that. I had a student recently who was on an overnight camp, and the parents tried to send up food that he would like, but he was a very picky eater. And they knew that there would be pizza and chicken nuggets and French fries and things like that at the overnight camp. So they didn't send that stuff, but it was different pizza and chicken nuggets and French fries that he was used to at home. And I don't think that we anticipated that. And this was a problem because he was there for a whole week. And if he didn't eat any of the food, he was going to be very hungry. So when we exposed him to it, and this was a student who it was very capable of like rationalizing and talking to and explaining, and he really understood. He would just like fall apart every mealtime and refuse to eat anything and say it was horrible and it was disgusting. And so we had a simple solution, which was just offering him a little bit of reinforcement for trying the food. And we found something that was motivating for him, and we offered it to him contingent on him just trying the food. And it worked. And he was able to at least get through the week and try some of the food that was offered at meals and then access that reinforcement.
So many times I'll go into a home and parents will say, listen, please, I really want, my child to eat more foods. They're not eating either not eating enough food or they're not eating a variety of food. And those are two major issues. And they're major issues for so many reasons. I mean, they're major issues because if your child's not eating, that's a safety thing. It's also very much a cultural thing, right? So if you're going to a party and there's food served at the party, or if food is very much a part of your culture, you need your child to be able to eat food to not only sustain themselves, but also to be a part of your community for sure.
And I know as a mom, when my kids are being picky about what I'm making for dinner, that dinner time does not go well. It's a disaster when one kid is insisting that this food is horrible and it's disgusting and I'm not going to eat it. And, just as a family, being able to make one dinner and sit down and everybody enjoy that dinner. For me as a parent, that's a huge goal. And I'm sure it's a goal for a lot of people.
So I guess if, a parent says, please help me, I need a food program, I need to teach my child to eat a variety of food, where do you start? The very first thing I would say is start with the parents. You need parent buy-in for this, and you need parent follow through, because, I can, take a child into a clinic and teach the student to eat, lots of foods. But if that follow through isn't there at home and the student goes back to being offered, 3 different types of things before they get what they want, then all my teaching is in vain. So really make sure that you explain the procedure to parents and that you have that parent follow through as well as that parent buy-in.
And a good way to get that buy-in is to get parents to start tracking the food log. Start recording just what their kid is eating. No changes, no trying to change it up, but just giving them a regular food diary and having them track what their kid is eating. This is a good way for them to show that they're invested and that they can access then some reinforcement for doing something that's part of this program. We're actually going to be sharing our food log free download with this video. So click on the link to get it.
The food log is a really great way to open that discussion with parents, right? Great. So you want your child to eat more. Show me now what he is or isn't eating. So the parent can track, okay, they're eating this. They used to eat this in the past, but they don't eat this anymore. What can we do? As a BCBA, that food log is also very valuable because not only does it open that discussion with parents, but it also shows us, what the student is eating, and we can look at it, and oftentimes there's patterns there. So, I'll look at a food log sometimes and the student only eats white foods, or the student only eats yellow vegetables, but they eat nothing else. They'll have corn, but nothing else. Or the student has, this texture, but not this texture. The student used to eat these things, but not this. So it gives us a lot of information, and that's where you want to start. So oftentimes I'll look at that food log and say, okay, if the student is only eating white foods, what other white foods can we introduce into the student's diet? I'm not going to go with broccoli as the first food if the student is only eating white foods. Likewise, if the student is, eating, bananas, but nothing else. It shows me that, bananas, yogurt, it's all mushy food. So what other types of softer foods can this student try and maybe make part of their repertoire? And I find that if you can look at that and get some success from, just taking the food that they already eat and just expanding it a little bit, that's way better than trying something completely brand new that the student, is going to go, wow. It's like, us looking at a pile of snakes that are still moving and going, I need to touch that. Ugh. Right? Like that could be the equivalent of broccoli for some kids. Another thing too is looking at the way students consume food. I had a student one time who only ate goldfish crackers and cheese sandwiches, but the goldfish crackers had to be served in a little baggie because that's how he got them at school. He couldn't have them served any other way. They couldn't be in a bowl. Heaven forbid the orange bowl versus the blue bowl. Like, couldn't do it. So the very first place we started was actually just having look, these are goldfish crackers, regardless of whether they're in the plastic bag or in a specific, specific bowl. So we got him to tolerate that. And then with the cheese sandwiches, we got him to tolerate, eating not only like the T, but also when they're cut like an X. So that's where we started. Other students, we can start with, having them just try a small amount of food, maybe just even having it on their plate, having them touch it, and then maybe having it touched to the mouth. Shira touched on that first then contingency. And that's typically the way we would start, right? So having a first then contingency of, first you try a little bit of food and then you get something, and then you get something should not be part of their day-to-day repertoire. It needs to be something that's special.
And know your student. If your student is very sensitive to this, I wouldn't use it and ruin mealtime. So I wouldn't do this during mealtime, during times they're actually expected to eat, and all of a sudden you're changing all their food. I would do it at a separate time so that you can keep mealtime as rigid and as structured as they need it to be, so that they're still eating and it's still a happy and comfortable situation. And then teach them how to try new foods at a separate time, using that first contingency, using that reinforcement, and moving very, very slowly, starting with just exposure, with just them touching it or being comfortable around it or putting it to their mouth. I wouldn't force them to eat it right at first, or eat a certain amount right at first. Like, go by what they're comfortable with. You don't want any student to become, completely upset and nervous about what you're, having them do. Go with their comfort level and use that reinforcement, and very, very slowly try to change things so that they're trying different things.
The last point that I want to say is really trying to, when we're first teaching these things, we teach them away from mealtime, because I don't want to teach students that they, oh, well, you don't want this. Well, you get access to no food whatsoever. You can't do that. You can't have students skip mealtime. But maybe it's just before lunch when they're hungry, not just after breakfast when they've just eaten a bunch of stuff. But, when they're hungry, we can say, okay, let's try these small amounts, and let's introduce you to this. And if you take it, great. If you don't, you know what, we're going to push it away and we'll try again in 5 minutes. And then when it's scheduled mealtime, you get to eat, what you normally eat, and then we'll try this again, a little bit later.
Yes, don't make eating aversive. So we talked about why it's important to introduce new foods, how to start with that food log, getting parents buy-in, and then where to go from there, and how to start exposing our kids, not during mealtime, but at a separate time, to very, very small changes in their diet.
So click on the link in and around this video for our freebie on, it's a food log.